He's editor-in-chief of Breitbart News and a New York Times best-selling author. And on this podcast, he brings deep research, prescient analysis, and world-class guests. He's Alex Marlow, and this is The Alex Marlow Show.
All right, so as I mentioned on yesterday's show, I've got a wild work week and family life week. So what I like to do in these sort of weeks is to catch up with friends and my favorite guests. Because I like to kind of mostly do the show by myself. But occasionally, it's really nice to have cool people to call on to help out, pitch in a little bit. And my colleagues at Salem, the faculty, as they're known, is some of the greatest voices in radio. I've always been a Salem fan long before I joined up with the team here. And our latest syndicated radio host, Chris Stigall, is a guy who I've been on his show a number of times. And Chris is with me, those of you who are listening. So I'll bring Chris in for this compliment, so it's not totally removed. But Chris, I do so many hits on radio for books and for Breitbart articles and things like that. I mean, it has to be thousands over the years. And it's not that often where I'm on with a host, I think, oh, this guy's got it. And I was on with you, it had to be years ago, and I became aware that you're really hyper talented. And I've been on your show maybe 2 or 3 times since, and every time you never disappoint. So you're now nationally syndicated. That is so cool. Congratulations. Just give the audience some background if they don't know it, where you came from, how you got your start in radio, who your inspirations were. I mean, it's just great just to get to know you a little bit.
Alex, thank you. First of all, you made my day. I really appreciate the kind words, sincerely. And you likewise always bring it as a guest. So we're always grateful to have you on the show. This show, we just launched in January with the syndicated offering, and that was because Hugh Hewitt moved into Sebastian Gorka's time slot. Seb is now, of course, with the administration. So fortuitous that a lot of things had to happen. Trump had to win. I had been doing radio in Philadelphia, morning radio in Philadelphia, for about the last 14 years or so. And so I'd been waiting for an opportunity like this. Salem finally provided it for me. But I've been doing talk radio really full-time since 2004. So I'm in my 21st year of it or something like that. And started in Kansas City, made my way to Philadelphia, and here we are today. So that's the short story.
That's always fun with radio guys who are really committed to it, is that you do have to move. And if you embrace that you're a radio host and that's the medium that is your medium, that you do have to chase slightly bigger markets, and you'll go to whichever market will have you. This is not an uncommon thing. I mean, you're a pretty young guy, I think. I don't know how old you are, but from the looks of you, you're a pretty young guy. You'll be the last of the generation that did this, I'm guessing.
I think. I talk about this a lot. I'm 48. And I think I told my family, when I had this opportunity to go syndicated, they looked at me, their stomachs kind of sunk.
Yeah. I
said, hey, the show's going to get syndicated. And they said, oh, does that mean we're moving again? I said, no, that's the great thing. In 2025, you don't move anymore. And everybody can be anywhere they want now. So there really is no such thing as moving for any show. And that is far different than it was even 10 years ago. So that's a blessing.
That said, I like my local hosts, and I'm still a radio guy, I always will be.
Sure.
But I like my local host to know what's going on in the local community. And I always find it a little half-hearted when the station managers are putting on a big name that has no connection with the city. Unless they're one of those guys who have earned it and are nationally syndicated. Like, that's it. Those are the two options for me. I want the guys who are going to go hyper-local, or the guys who are just, you have the connectivity coast to coast. So so how many stations are you on right now?
Last I heard, and I don't have an official count, somewhere around 400.
That's unbelievable. So overnight, you just go from a station or two to 400.
It's unbelievable. And, the fun part of it is something that I've always geeked out about as a radio guy all these years, to get to read the different stations we're on. I get what are called liner notes, and they ask me to record various things for local stations around the country. And that's just a thrill, because I've always been a local guy my whole life, listening to syndicated guys do material for our local radio stations. It's such a thrill. I too love local radio. I love local hosts. Anytime I'm invited to go on a local show, I love it. I'm really looking forward to, I hope, going to visit some local markets in the coming days and weeks. But people have to get to know me first. So I'm really, in many ways, starting all over. I've been doing this a long time, but most of the audience has no idea who I am. So I got to earn their trust again,
Yeah, well, but you got that great voice, though. Was it always like that when you were, because you can't always teach it, because especially in the authentic era, is that I feel like I'm conscientious to not overly modulate and pitch my voice because I feel like people think I'm BSing them to some degree. So you've got that perfect radio cadence. Was that something you picked up over time, or is that something that you were kind of born that way?
I think learning to project from the diaphragm was one of those things that I was pretty conscious of early. And so I do know that I have a focus on that now just comes natural that maybe other people don't. Learning how to talk from down here instead of up here.
Sure.
Try not to put on any affect of any kind. I think sometimes people hear it and
it's not worth it. I mean, Ben Shapiro is a perfect case example. Yes. I mean, he's one of the biggest moneymakers in talk, and his voice is not pleasing to listen to. And I don't say this to be mean to Ben. I mean, I've never said anything I think mean about Ben publicly. So that's not my game here.
Oh, but he's brilliant.
But it is not what you would think of as a typical radio announcer. And then so there's a lot of ways to do it. But okay, so tell me, how old are you when you decide you want to do radio? Where are you? Where's the first gig?
God put this on my heart all the way back. I can remember my earliest memory of it is fourth grade, because I remember the morning DJ making my parents laugh, getting ready for their day. And I always thought that job, that's incredible. There's a guy in that box or in the car that people are listening to. And the morning was always uniquely intimate to me, Alex, because there are other parts of the day people broadcast, but morning was special to me because that was like, to me, the most intimate part of someone's day. Getting ready, shaving, putting on the makeup, getting the kids together, packing the lunches, making the coffee. There was something always sort of magic to me about it. And I always loved the morning guy, as much as I don't like getting up all these years later, but still.
I'm going there. I'm going there soon.
That's been brutal. But the guys that I always admired the most did the morning show. And so I came up in FM music radio, actually. And it wasn't until 2001, September 11th, as a matter of fact, that was the first time that I ever really started to think about talk radio, only because those that were around during that time, particularly in our business, remember, nobody knew what to do. There was this huge national tragedy. I was playing music and doing chuckle bucket stuff. I'm interviewing comics and playing games and playing music. And then suddenly this national tragedy happens. And my bosses looked at me and they said, just keep playing music. They didn't want me to talk anymore at all. And instinctively, I just thought, well, this horrible thing has happened. Everybody's just been, we got to talk about it. Down the hall, there was a talk station, a sister station, and those guys were on taking calls. And I thought, oh, well, now that's where I've got to be. And so I started thinking more seriously about myself, what I thought about the country and my worldview. Who was this that attacked us and why? And that was the first time that I listened to Rush Limbaugh. And it was to the moon after that. I was never interested in doing FM music radio again. Talk was where the substance was, where I thought the smart people that cared were, and that's where I wanted to be.
Did anyone ever try to pry you with drugs to get you to play their music on the air when you were? Because in LA, that was a big thing. And it was about until 9/11. It was a 90s thing, but I was thinking about it that was a real thing out here.
I came into FM music radio just at the tail end of the debauchery. I mean, from what I understand, the 80s and early 90s were like the heyday where it was just cocaine and hookers and limos and record representatives, getting you to play their tunes. I kind of missed out on that. Yeah.
It's for the best, though. I mean, it's no way to go through life.
Although I was a rabid alcoholic, but that's unrealated.
Yeah,
I've kicked that too. Yeah.
It's glad you kicked that though before the morning show, which we'll get to. As I've gotten older, they definitely punish you more in the morning if you're gonna have a couple pops. And before you definitely
I tell you, I powered through it for a number of years.
I believe it.
Where I'd tie one on and stay up late and do the show in the morning. Never drunk. I was always responsible that way.
Yeah.
Well, maybe questionable, but I did my work. But
so are you completely sober now? Is that part of the lifestyle?
6 years now. Yeah.
Wow. Congratulations.
Thank you very, very much.
It must help your productivity.
It does. It helps my mood. I didn't realize how. It's funny. I realized that I drank to suppress a lot of anxiety, only to realize that I was not, in fact, late in the day, I was not, in fact, funnier as I thought or more enjoyable when I was liquored up. I was actually pretty obnoxious. And, for years, you talk yourself into thinking, if you know people that battle with this, You think, oh,
Everyone
well,
does.
I'm no fun to be around until I start, popping back a few. And actually, that's not true at all. So, you have to come to grips with all that psychological stuff.
So tell me about your evolution in conservative talk. So Kansas City's first. What year is that?
The very first year I started doing talk radio was 2004.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then when does the move to Philadelphia take place? Because I feel like I've only been on your show since you've been in Philadelphia.
That's true. I went to Philadelphia in late 2010, and I started my full-time show on what was then CBS on the Philadelphia Phillies affiliate and my first Rush Limbaugh affiliate. Now, that was the thrill for me, Alex. I mean, when I finally got a job in a big market like Philadelphia and I was on Rush's Philadelphia radio station, I'd hit the jackpot. That was as big as it could get for me. So 2011 is when I started there. I did that show on that radio station, which switched owners. Then there was a brief 9-month window where I was tossed out into the wilderness by an Al Soros-owned company. I'll just leave it at that.
It happens. He buys up those stations. He does. I've written about it.
Yeah, and I'm glad to be gone. I would rather never work again than work for them. I'll say that much. But Salem, that's when I got to know Salem. And in your setup, you mentioned how fond you are of them. I must confess, I didn't know a lot about Salem.
Interesting.
But I knew that they were across town. And I called up the local guy who ran that Salem station. And I said, listen, I have built, 10, 12 years of equity in this market. I don't want to leave it. I've got my whole family here. I raised my kids here. And they were good enough to bring me in. Phil Boyce and the team at Salem, they said, yeah, let's try it. So I brought the morning show and most of my clients over to the Salem local radio station where I did the show for the last 5 years. And then that turned into this syndicated opportunity. So God steers, right? Put you in the right spot at the right time.
I'll tell you where for me, so I loved I always had Salem hosts on. During the day, I was a Dennis Prager obsessive. I would listen every second of every show. There were years where I didn't miss a second of the show.
By the way, what a blessing. May I interrupt on him and say, I know you've talked about it, that he's coming back. Isn't that a wonderful thing? Yeah,
he's coming back. He's got I don't think I've brought it up with my audience yet because I was on the road last week a little bit. But he'll be back for an hour starting this summer.
That's right.
And it's great. And, Charlie Kirk, who's getting a lot of the hours that Dennis had before, is a huge Dennis fan. And I know that the Salem television network, or the streaming network, which I'm a part of, is doing a lot of, I think, special episodes of Dennis as well. So they've got a big, Dennis's legacy is well within reach. I will have Dr. Paul Kengor, who's doing videos for PragerU right now, a big series on this week. So Prager's footprint is just massive. And I'm definitely a part of that legacy. And also Larry Elder. So Larry Elder, for me, he was the local host that you're talking about. He was your morning guy who was a part of your family, even though he wasn't. That's for me, that was Larry Elder at my house. So Larry was on in everyone's car. All the parents who were with us in politically all listened to Larry. When Larry would come to town for a book signing, and everyone knew about it. Yeah. And he was like he was everyone's friend only. And we knew he lived on the hill, kind of overlooking he did well for himself. He had a big mansion on the hill. And he looking down on all of us, keeping an eye on all of us in the city of LA. And we just loved him. And I got the opportunity I felt very motivated to write to him one day. And I wrote to him, this is a longer story, so I won't do the full rendition for the audience today. But he actually wrote back, and he was interested. Wow. And he let me publish a column for him on his website, and he had me on his show a couple times. And it was one of these things where all of a sudden he's proving everything that you would hope, that he actually does care about the people in the city he's talking to. And he went on to be nationally syndicated, run for office, all that cool stuff, do TV and all sorts of different things that he's done. But that was my foray into understanding that radio is this very intimate medium. It's very intimate, and it's two-way street. It is not just the audience members. It's the hosts as well feel that way.
And it's why, first of all, Larry is one of the sweetest guys I've ever met in the industry, with no pretense about him whatsoever. I adore him, and I'm so glad to hear that story because it confirms everything I've always thought about him. But that's why I've always argued a bit with the idea that, radio's dying and it's all podcasts all the time. I don't mean any disrespect to podcasts. I mean, I started one. I've got one. They're great. I still would argue that podcasts are not live radio, and there is a difference. There will always be a difference, and I don't care what you say. Somebody live behind a live microphone taking live calls and talking about live things will always be different than podcasts. It just always will. So
I'm podcasting now, but I totally agree, and that's those were. So I was on Sirius XM for a number of years, and this is going to be a good segue because I would have to get up at 2:20 in the morning for the last couple of years to do the show, and I could not give up that real estate, and I was not well paid for it. They paid Breitbart well, but I kind of looked at it as part of my Breitbart responsibility. So I was not getting rich off of this thing. I was not building some sort of a nest egg with a big podcasting subscriber base or anything like that. But that real estate where I could get up and talk to deeply committed radio fans for 3 hours every morning, no matter how early it was, that it was one of those thrills that you just don't give it up. I mean, it's just important.
And that's a bond. It's everything, Alex. It's what makes it work. I mean, because you have sponsors that sponsor the shows, and commercial radio is hard enough to sell. And then you start talking about conservative commercial talk radio. That's even harder to sell.
Right.
So the people that put their money and their sponsorships behind shows like yours and mine, they really have to believe in the product. The host has to believe in the product. The listeners have to trust the host that he believes in the product. It's a three-legged stool that has to happen that way. And thankfully, we've been blessed that way.
Missy, I think we know where we're inserting our ad break for today, by the way. So I think we got it. This is Alex Marlow for my friends at besthotgrill.com. They make the Solaire infrared grills, the hot, fast grills for everyday, year-round grilling. Maybe you've already got a low-temperature, low and slow smoking cooker, an egg, or a pellet barbecue, something like that. They're fine when you got the time, but you don't have to wait for the weekend with a Solaire infrared gas grill. It heats up to 1,000 degrees in just 3 minutes, even in the dead of winter. The high heat locks in those juices, grills food faster, makes steaks, chicken, veggies, fish, makes it succulent and tasty. In a matter of minutes, your family can have a healthy and great tasting grilled dinner. I'll tell you, I'm doing it tonight. I'm working hard this week, but I'll tell you, I'm cooking for my family. I'm going to have the chicken. I'm marinating it right now while I'm cutting this ad. And tonight, I'm going to fire up that Solaire grill. I'm going to put them on. It's going to take 5-6 minutes. Going to cook the chicken. Look, I love a good slow cook, but that's a treat. Your everyday thing, you want to lock in those flavors with the best hot grill on the market. That's a Solaire infrared grill. With Solaire's demo rental program, you can try it before you buy, grilling all the foods your family enjoys without a salesman berating you, beating you down. And you can see why the USA made in America, Solaire is the last grill you will ever buy. Learn about besthotgrill.com. Go to besthotgrill.com. Try before you buy with the Solaire demo rental program. besthotgrill.com. What more can I say? So you're doing the morning show. So give me the exact times wherever people can get it if they're not. So it's on if you know what your Salem station is in your area. And so what time does it start? And you can't get on podcasts, but we like the live. When is it exactly?
So 6 to 9 in the East, which, out there in the West where you are, that's super early. That's what, 3 o'clock it starts? 3 to...
Yeah, but it's smart to get going if you're going to hit traffic.
Yeah, 3 to 6 a.m. on the West Coast, and you can do the math as you go east. But that's where we are. You can watch it. I'll tell you, the Salem News Channel app, I think is a fantastic app. It's one of the most beautifully designed and easy to use I've ever used. If you want to watch the show or listen to it that way, the Salem News Channel app, you can click watch now, watch it live, and see it right there. And of course, we're on YouTube, and that Salem News Channel app also stores the whole show later if you want to watch it later. And of course, the podcast offering as well. You can find all of that at my website, chrisstigall.com.
Okay, so we'll put that in the show notes. But also the Salem app is really good. Everyone should get that. They've been putting up a couple of my shows on the weekends, and they do look very cool. So they edit them today, so they look nice and slick, and that is cool. Okay, so you knew this was coming, especially given all of the social media chatter these days.
Yeah.
What's your morning routine? You rubbing bananas on your face? I mean, how are you getting in there at 6 a.m.? Because you're going to be hot. You can't warm up. Like, you got to get there hot at 6 a.m. So you're getting the bottled water bath.
Yeah, brother, it's coffee all the way. I have to have it. I drink pots of it. I can't get enough of it. I am so glad. That's one thing, one of our sponsors, I'm trying to lose a little weight. I've always battled weight. And one of the things I'm so happy with is that the doctors have never said I had to give up coffee. Thankfully, my ticker's in good shape. So they say, drink all you want. And I'm glad. I drink it black, straight up, love it. So that's, can't do without the coffee. And I guess now that I'm visual, good lighting. That's key.
Oh man, this has been a big struggle for me. So this is the real. So in my spirit of I can talk to anyone. I could roll for hours and hours if you put an interesting person in a conversation with me, I'll go all night. Like, let's do it. But the work for me is I got to actually make sure my hair looks okay. I got to make sure my wardrobe is not looking terrible. That's a huge adjustment for talk radio people.
I hate it.
Yeah.
Hate it.
But your suits are sharp.
Worst. Well,
but your suits are sharp though.
It's not my favorite because, Face for Radio, I didn't get into this what's always been so wonderful about radio is the power of the imagination. You project a range of emotion and the audience can take that in their mind anywhere they want. The visual, I find, and you can help me with this, I just don't, my kids who are teenagers, they do this. I know most people do it. They play a video and they're maybe not watching it, but they're listening to it. And I'm told so many younger people prefer to start a video to listen to it as opposed to a straight up podcast that's just audio. And I don't get that phenomenon. Do you?
I don't either. No, I'm pure audio. So I will throw on the podcast usually just because when I was in the car, it would be the live radio. And then, but now that I don't commute, it's usually just Apple for me. Sometimes Spotify if the show's not on Apple.
I need someone to explain to me the phenomenon of starting a video to listen to it. I don't understand it. Maybe
I will tell you what's the ultimate, and if anyone has not done this on my show, and they tried on Chris's as well, is that if you got on the YouTube, you can now cast it on your TV. So that is kind of fun.
That's
one
cool.
of my the biggest fans I know says that she likes to do the show that way. I find that to be a huge honor. That feels like a really big honor that they do that. And Misty makes the show look really good. So you could try that, but no, I'm not like put it on the YouTube and then put it in your pocket. That's very odd to me. I don't get it. So it's
horrifying. I'll tell you this, Salem News Channel broadcasting this thing on their platform every day. When people say, I'm watching you as I get ready this morning, I think, well, that is weird. I mean, all my career, I have never been visible ever, not even on a webcam. And now suddenly, that there are millions of people that ostensibly are streaming us wherever we are. Your show, our show. They can stream it on Samsung Plus TVs, Roku,
right?
Fubo, all those. I mean, there are potentially millions of people watching on televisions now that I never knew about before. So
and it really does. There's sometimes the mystery of not seeing the host is better, and sometimes seeing the host is better. I mean, it just depends. It's but you get your look pretty dialed in. I'm impressed actually. I like your suits. I think that you got the facial hair is cool. So keep doing what you do. The microphone looks great. It's an awesome microphone. So
thanks,
all
man.
that, but you really do got to think about that stuff. It's like every piece of my set, it looks like it's completely intentional, and it took months to kind of put everything there. And I should never say that because it has to look like it's just there. And and I do really work here. Like when I'm done with this, I'm going to write right here. On
is that your working space there?
Yeah, that is. But it came together for a very long period of time. But there are pros. Like if you got a Daily Wire budget, then someone will just come in and just make something nice for you. But it's the
you can get set envy. I have found doing this now just the last couple of months. I'm looking at other people's going, well, should I do that? Do I need a bigger sound stage? Should I bring in? And then I just thought, you know what? No, this is what I do. This will be fine. This is enough. That's how this looks is really not my focus. If that's what you want, I'm sure there are millions of other places you can go shop.
All right. Well, I want to talk to you a little bit about the news because that's how people are going to get to know you even better than knowing your morning routine of just guzzling coffee, which is my routine as well. The same routine, But I got to. We haven't talked about the Signal stuff yet on this show, which is why don't you give it, because you've done hours of radio on this already. Why don't you give your synopsis of what happened and what your take is?
Yeah, I first of all said I reject, and I don't know why our side still does it. Like it's still 1998, and we think this is like the McLaughlin Group where we're all still, on our fainting couches and are polishing our brass buttons. This is not, we're in a new world. We're in a new game, as I know you know. So we're playing for keeps here. And The Atlantic is not exactly this bastion of trustworthy journalism. So the very first thing I said was, and I know there have been hearings since, but the very first thing I said this morning was, why would we give The Atlantic the benefit of the doubt? Why do they get to frame the story? I reject anything coming from them until I see it for myself. That was my very first point. And I think that's the most important point.
Totally. And if you go through the Atlantic article and you go through the text, it's way less offensive than the way it was framed in the media that Trump had just leaked war secrets. But I will start with the obvious one. Is like, how did they let Jeffrey Goldberg, one of the worst people in journalism, onto a text thread? Have we figured that out?
It does sound, I will say, our CIA director now. Sorry, late in my day here. Ratcliffe, He apparently said in testimony today, and I thought it interesting because I'd heard some people allude to this. This Signal app, and apparently this technology is something they inherited. And it's pre-programmed. So it sounds very possible that these guys were basically handed a means of communication that had contacts already loaded into it, rather than they physically loaded in themselves. So that sounds plausible. It sounds like what Ratcliffe said today. So doesn't excuse. I'm not trying to excuse it. It was totally, a boneheaded thing, but it's
totally
plausible.
I've got the Signal. I've got all of. I mentioned this before to my audience, but I've got all of Andrew Breitbart's contacts, who is the most networked person in all of media, in my phone. So I've got thousands and thousands and thousands of contacts of people way worse than Jeffrey Goldberg included. So there is a possibility, if I had an assistant, say start a group chat, put the vice president in there, put the Homeland Security Secretary in there, and put just a few cool podcasters in there just for fun, just so they they know what's going on. And then don't put Jeffrey Goldberg. But then someone accidentally hears that, we're putting Jeffrey Goldberg in. I mean, you can see Alex, how the mistake could get made, but how did they not check it?
You're a journalist, and I would love to get your point of view on this, because I opined about this morning. Yeah. There's nothing illegal about it, but what kind of journalist sits in the weeds and consumes all this sensitive information for a couple of weeks, says nothing, then waits to write a story on it? I feel like he's not a patriot. I mean, they're kind of, I don't think it's admirable. I'm not saying it's illegal. Is it improper? I feel it's kind of gross. Is it gross, or is it a journalism
It is.
thing?
It's certainly. Yeah. It's not. It's something where you're putting your dunking on the bad guys over your country, which is, you don't want to catch yourself doing that. You want to catch yourself. You would like to think what we're doing is a noble profession. For most of us, it's not. Let's be honest. Yeah. But you would like to, when you get up in the morning and you do your ice bath with the Saratoga water and you rub the banana peel on your face and you look in the mirror, you would like to think that what you're doing for the rest of the day is going to matter and be important for us having a better way of life. So obviously sitting there and just wait when clearly a mistake has been made, you should for sure get your 15 minutes out of it, but you should right away just speak up and say, hey, guys, I'm not supposed to be here. Can someone call me and talk to me what's going on? Get yourself a story for sure.
Yes.
But don't just sit there forever lying in wait and then write the most sensational, bombastic headline, which was, I don't have it right in front of me, but it was that he got worse war planning. It wasn't war planning. They were chit-chatting basically about usual stuff.
I will say what Trump has done really well, and I'm proud of him for this after all these years. Have you noticed when he's questioned about things like this, as he was yesterday?
Yes.
He's so good at turning the question right back around to the media member asking it. And he said, what was in the chat exactly? What was it?
Yeah, what was it?
First
time hearing of this.
He makes the member of the media explain it rather than he just kind of take it. He makes them talk it out. And I love it because 9 times out of 10, when he makes them do it, it turns out they really don't have all their facts. And they look kind of foolish. And that was sort of the case. We didn't really know 24 hours ago what this guy had found or read. We just had to take his word for it. I don't take the Atlantic's word for anything.
Yeah, and you shouldn't. So those of you who in the audience, if you're new, I've done a ton of this, so I don't want to elaborate too much. But the Atlantic is one of the worst magazines in the country. It's funded by Laureen Powell Jobs, who is a Soros-esque figure that funds all elements of the institutional left, and Jeffrey Goldberg is her handpicked editor, who is in it as a partisan left-wing activist more than a journalist. But he's been at it for a long time, so he's well-sourced, so it's not
He's the suckers and losers guy, right?
The suckers and losers guy, which is one of the great fake news hoaxes, never happened. And it was denied by everyone who was in the room, including John Kelly's own staff. John Kelly ultimately changed his story and said it was real years later. But at the time, John Kelly's staff ran to us at Breitbart and said it was not real, the suckers and losers hoax. Because the implication, Chris, and you'll like this if you hadn't heard this before, that the implication was John Kelly stood there and did nothing while Trump called the dead troops suckers and losers. And so the implication was Kelly had done nothing. So Kelly didn't like that at the start. So he said it's fake. And then years later, he said, no, it was real. So so these people are all liars, and they just don't like the president. They don't like this administration. And frankly, they don't really like our country. And that's what you're kind of going at, right?
Yeah. And I made a list just off the top of my head last night coming into this morning of, okay, if we're going to get the vapors and hysterical about national security, let's go down that list. And I just started to make a list of the national security errors, if not outright offenses, of the last 4 years. Chief among them, or maybe 6, Mark Milley. I mean, the Joint Chiefs calling up China and saying, hey, don't worry about this guy. I've got him. While he's serving the sitting president, that's outrageous. I started there and I just went forward. The Afghan withdrawal, Chinese spy balloon, pick it. We could go on firing military men and women for not taking that experimental shot.
Right.
There are so many egregious offenses in the border, not the least of them. It's like this selective outrage that some guys were caught chatting on an app, that maybe they shouldn't have been or whatever. I don't know. I just don't. I'm sorry. My selective outrage does not apply here. It applies to these guys in the last 4 years that have absolutely gutted the country. Lloyd Austin, Alex. Lloyd Austin left his job, literally walked off his job for a surgery and didn't tell anybody. And then when he had some complications and had to be taken away in an ambulance, he tells his aide, don't call 911, but don't tell them not to turn on the lights or sirens, and don't tell anybody that we're going. The president didn't know. His number 2 didn't know. Our defense secretary was under the knife and no one knew. And I'm supposed to get upset that Mike Walls and Pete Hegseth are texting. Shut up.
Yeah, right. It's so we've decided this thing, and I know we in talk radio aren't always like this because we got to fill hours and hours of content. So it's not fun just to be totally black and white. But we've decided that every time you bust someone on one thing, it must be Watergate. And
yeah, that's right.
It's not. It was sort of incompetent, I guess, but it's not the end of the world. They cannot do it again. It was ultimately the stakes couldn't be lower. There was zero stakes.
You know what my team objected to the most, Alex?
What?
This morning they were objecting to the fact that grown men were using emojis. My team very, very offended that these men were going back and forth with fist pump emojis, and they didn't like that at all. So we had a debate on the show about whether grown men should use emojis in communication or not.
What do you think? Because I did an episode on my show on stuff men aren't supposed to do. We're apparently not supposed to eat soup in public. We're apparently not supposed to
true?
have. Jesse Waters came up with this, and all of the things he put in his list were debatable, which is why I talked about it. It was not an obvious thing, because I never thought you can't eat soup in public.
I never thought about that.
I regaled the audience of this story of, you remember Pat Caddell, probably.
Yes, sure.
So Pat became a close friend of mine, and I watched him have a meal where, Chris, he ate back-to-back soups. He had a soup starter and a soup main. Have you ever been with a human being who ever ordered soup starter and soup main? You've never had that experience.
I tell you, brother, I'm a sucker for a lobster bisque. I mean, anytime there's a good lobster bisque, I have it. Yeah.
Yeah, but he had back-to-back soups.
Back to soup.
And watching him eat the soup, and he was not super coordinated. He had the big beard, and he looks like a walrus. And absolutely one of the greatest Americans of the last century, bar none.
He is.
But still, watching him eat soup, it made you think, maybe you're not supposed to do this. Like, maybe this is for home. Like,
that's just kind of drinking and eating soups generally, that could just be a messy thing that maybe no one should do publicly. I don't know. Maybe you can only do that in private. I get a little weird about people doing milk and cereal. Not in public necessarily, but it's just kind of weird to watch.
It is. Because you have to slurp it. And no, it's funny. I watched one of my, because I'm a chefluencer guy, where I will watch people cook for themselves on when I'm unwinding on the internet. And I did watch a guy who I think is really great eat a bowl of milk and cereal recently, and it really put me off. And
Isn't
I had
it the worst?
It was very strange. Like, why is he doing this? He should not have done
I got the
this.
willies even watching my kids do it growing up. I have to admit, I couldn't watch my kids eat cereal. It skeeved me out. I don't know why, but it just did.
That's
but on the emoji thing, they say, I got a football coach friend. He's a high school football coach, tough guy, And he said years ago, don't emoji. I don't want emojis. Don't. When the guys would group text, don't. Grown men don't do. And I thought it was a one-off. But today, my own team confirmed grown men must not use emojis. So lesson learned, I guess.
So here's where the emoji works for me. I find it to be lightly dismissive, like I'm politely excusing myself from the conversation.
Okay.
So if I throw a exclamation point, or I like to do the one where you like put the hands up in the air like you're raising the roof. Like that's my way of saying I love you, I see you, I support you, I want you to have a great life. I gotta go. I'm out of this conversation. I'm moving on.
My producer Eddie, When we get caught in long email chains, Eddie's trick is to just respond at some point. He just always writes, "Okay."
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that gets the job done same
no
way.
matter what is said, because he feels like that's enough that he has acknowledged whatever it is, and it's not really an acknowledgement or a confirmation he's going to do anything, nor a denial. Okay. He goes, nobody knows what to do with it. It short circuits the whole thing. He loves doing that. Okay.
Here's a hot tip for the audience. Here's one, and Chris, you're free to use it too if you want.
Oh, okay.
But my one that shuts down the conversation, but in a way that gets people jacked up, fired up, when I throw an on it. Like if someone asks a question, and I say on it, there's nothing better than reading a text where you've requested something and someone says on it. You're like, yeah, great. Now I'm feeling good. And also the conversation's over. So that's a really good one. Please use on it from now on.
It really does sound like a definitive action item on it. You're right.
I'm doing it. And try not to blow it and like make it seem like it's coming from a disingenuous place. For me, my honors are genuine. If you're in the audience and you've gotten an on it from me before, it is real. So
I will give you one that offends me deeply that I hate. Good for you.
Yeah. Oof.
Is there anything more patronizing than good for you?
No, it's great. It's terrific. I was just watching a show where they used good for you in a patronizing way, and it was perfectly done. It was perfectly done.
But some people, I think, say, "Oh, Alex, you've got a podcast. Good for you." And I think they mean it.
Yeah.
But it sounds it's so insulting.
Yeah. It's also funny to get congratulated for something that, like I'll launch a show and then people will say congrats, and then it's like, well, you don't know what the show's doing. You might be doing terrible. Like how do you know?
So when I lost that job, as I was telling you a few years ago, and I started my podcast, I had about a 9-month window where I started a podcast, and I rented a studio space, and I had a next door neighbor who I hadn't met, and the guy was an insurance broker or something, and I'm carrying some equipment up. Now I'm just depressed as hell because I've lost my job, and now I don't know what I'm going to do, and now I'm doing a podcast, and I really didn't have much faith in it. And I'm just bummed out anyway. And the guy says, "So what do you do?" I said, "Well, I'm going to start a show here." What kind of show? Podcast. And he says, "Oh, like Rush Limbaugh. Good for you."
Yeah.
He said, I mean, you may as well have just kicked me square in between the legs at that point.
That's a tough feeling.
Just the worst feeling ever. I'd love to tell that story. The good for you. It's like the kiss of death. Yeah.
This is this seems like if we had a magazine culture, this seems like a perfect magazine essay for like a long read on a weekend. Well, why would you retire? Good for you. It's lost all integrity.
Put it in the Atlantic.
Yeah. One day, it could have been there. Let me ask you about, so the topic for me, the topic of the year, I guess there's 2 topics of the year. But the first topic of the year is there's a good one, a bad one. The good one is the cuts and the way it's making people's minds melt. And I want to go there with you. But the bad one is the lawfare. I think the left has figured out some way to get Trump to some degree with these injunctions, these district courts. There's hundreds of them. And it's become very clear to me that anyone that's been appointed by Biden or Obama is more political than trying to preserve law and order. And just opine on that for a bit, Chris.
Yeah, I agree with you. I will say that I think the unfortunate thing about John Roberts and the Supreme Court not getting involved in this as fast as I think they ought to is, for all the kind of institutionalism that I think a guy like Roberts wants to preserve, I think he's only making things demonstrably worse. The one thing he offers is, hey, let's not talk about impeachment, which actually I agree with him on, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But I will just say this kind of high-minded approach to let's let the system play out and let's get an appeal and blah, 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 and months long. Roberts and the Supreme Court have to establish right now that the executive has the autonomy to do what it's doing. And if the judicial has the ability at the district level, every Tom, Dick, and Harry on a court can stop the president of the United States duly elected by 77 million people, then what have we? We don't have an executive. And I would just say that if the Supreme Court doesn't make this demarcation, they're creating an environment where people are just going to say, screw the court. Unless the Supreme Court says otherwise, I'm just going to do what I damn well please. It's building a hostility. And I think this is for both sides, incidentally. I would want this evenly applied. This started really under Obama. We did some of it with Trump. I just don't think every district court judge should have the ability to throw a switch in a president's decision-making. And I think the Supreme Court has to lay that out, or we really will come to a place where the left used to always say, just ignore the judge. That's what they kept telling Biden to do. Just ignore him. Well, here we are. I think they're daring us to ignore judges now.
If you want to stay strong and active and independent for years to come, you need to start paying attention to your bone and joint health now, not when it's too late. That's why I've got something for you. A free 60-second bone and joint health risk assessment that shows you exactly where you stand. Quick, real-time insights into your mobility and joint health from the comfort of your home. Think of it as a wake-up call. If you're already dealing with aches, stiffness, or joint discomfort, come on, who isn't? Your body is giving you warning signs, and don't ignore them. It takes 1 minute, and you can take control of your health. Go to juvent.com/Marlow. That's JUVENT.com/Marlow. You take the quiz, you get your results instantly. Your future self will thank you. That's juvent.com/Marlow. You won't regret that you did. If you could ask this in an apolitical way, if you ask conservatives, do you think every district judge should be able to single-handedly shut down the executive branch? I feel like both sides would say, no, of course not. And yet we're witnessing it case after case. I mean, there's been, dozens at this point already, and they're only going to continue.
I will say, look, to be fair, was it not a district judge that let us keep our jobs if we didn't want that stupid shot?
Right.
I mean, I would like to think that would go before the Supreme Court, but I literally was about to leave my job. Salem didn't want to, but Salem by law was going to have to compel me to get that shot in order for me to stay employed. I was prepared to quit over it. And right to the 11th hour, Salem waited and waited until they could legally no longer wait. And thankfully, because of a district court judge, stepped in and stopped that. And thank God he did. So I'm being inconsistent here, Alex. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm being inconsistent. But sometimes during the Biden era, a district court judge, I think, saved the Constitution. So I'm torn.
It does happen. So that's why I think it's complicated and why I think it's really interesting. But also, it's something that I fear a little bit because it doesn't feel like there's a way just to stop it. It doesn't feel like there's just a way to shut it down. I feel like this is going to be with us. And I'm asking smart people what the plan is, and there doesn't really seem to be a coherent plan. I'm promising the audience on the show that we're going to delve deep on this over the year. But it's what do you want? Where do we start? In your opinion?
I admonished anyone in the audience of mine, and I would say the same to your audience, that if there's anybody out there throwing that word impeachment around, let me explain why that's a disaster. And not that I'm even getting into the merits of whether judges deserve impeachment or not. I've seen the polling data on it. It's a disaster. If you want to talk about midterm elections and Republicans hanging on, and I think there's a real shot, I think we continue to prosecute lawfare, which is what we're watching, and I think that's a perfectly legitimate conversation to continue having. But when you take it to this next level of we're going to throw the judges out that we're fighting with, that's when you see the American public start to bristle. They're like, whoa, that starts to fall into that narrative of authoritarianism.
Yeah.
True or false, that's what people start to believe. And I've seen polling on it that says people get freaked out when Trump starts saying, let's just get rid of the judges. So we have to be very careful, I think, to have this fight, but in a careful way and not just throw impeachment around willy-nilly. In my opinion, I've seen the data that says Republicans are going to take it on the chin if they go down this road of let's go after judges. I don't think that's where we spend our energy right now.
So what are our moves? We just got to wear it for a while until it becomes clear what to do and just raise awareness, appeal things to the Supreme Court, and that's that?
Yes. I think the public is with us still. I think the public is with Trump. The polling all suggests that it is. I think everybody understands what Elon is uncovering. Republicans, and Trump specifically and his team, are communicating in a way we've never seen communication before, I don't think. These are masterful communicators by and large, and they keep telling the story. And I think most Americans know the waste, fraud, and abuse is real. We're overtaxed. We're spending way too much. Trump wants to give some of our money back and deregulate. They're uncovering these things. Most Americans understand it. They trust it. And then they hear a judge is stopping Trump from sending gang members to Venezuela. They're like, what? There's enough about this story that people understand that we can continue to explain and prosecute without going that next step of going, let's throw all the bums out. Even though I know that's our emotional tendency to want to do that, maybe even justifiably, we do have a system for that if it comes to that. But I don't think these 2 years, you get no taxes on Social Security, no taxes on overtime, no taxes on tips. You get this thing passed with Thune and Johnson, and we get something really meaningful. That's through the uprights, man. We could be talking about winning a midterm and maintaining Republican control. But if we get away from that and start talking about impeaching judges, we're screwed politically, in my view.
I think I'm largely with you. I got to give it some more thought, but I will tell you, I didn't jump at the impeachment is going to solve this idea. I like the fighting back in general. I like keeping people engaged and fired up, but I don't usually see that as actually a way to be productive. I would rather be productive than just be really animated and passionate. It's the productivity.
I think the Supreme Court is eventually going to say Donald Trump can and should be allowed to round up gang members and deport them to Venezuela without clearing it first. I think the Supreme Court's coming that way.
That'll work itself out. Over time. I think so. Okay, so the other one, which is I think you're a step ahead of me on this already, is Doge and the cuts. Are you confident enough cuts are happening? Are you confident that despite the public attacks on Musk, that he's going to be steely enough to fight through it? And just give me your overall perspective.
This is all about Congress. I think Elon's got the stuff. He said yesterday in the cabinet meeting, I've got a bunch of young, very smart people around me that could go out and make millions right now, but they're doing this as service to their country. By the way, same for him. He doesn't need this headache. They're putting their technological heads together. We're seeing what has always been traditionally an element of the left, technology, now weaponized against government. And Democrats have absolutely no idea how to process that, first of all. But all of this AI and all this technological advancement is showing Republicans, here's where the waste is, here's where we can make meaningful cuts. Now, the question is, do the Republicans have the strength, the backbone, the focus to get it done? I don't know. I want to believe that Thune and Johnson really, for the first time, understand what they have in front of them. But I keep hearing all of this, Senate wants to do this 3 different bills kind of thing, and Johnson doesn't. And of course, the Senate always wants to be the smartest guys in the room. And it's like, guys, we got one window of opportunity here, and go big and dream big and codify these cuts. But, members of Congress all like to keep and protect what's theirs. So let's be honest, there are probably a good number of Republicans that are not thrilled about some of the things Elon's uncovering and suggesting we cut. So will the Republicans really codify these cuts by Elon? Will they codify these tax cuts? Your guess is as good as mine on that, Alex.
All right. So last one for today is I want to introduce you to the co-star of the Alex Marlow Show here in the Salem Podcast Network, which is Jasmine Crockett. She is the greatest congressman, the leader of the Democratic Party, and she's going to run for president. She's getting ready to run. And I think the kids say she finna run for president. People can check me on that. That's how they say. You got kids, she finna run for president. That's going to happen.
Yeah, that's right.
That's what. And I say this because she's coding as a person that I describe as ratchet. She's not like this normally. She's educated. She could behave like a normal person, but instead she's leaning into this kind of nasty street aesthetic that is now apparently has a lot of cultural currency on the left. Check this out. Here she is.
Because we in these hot ass Texas streets, honey. Y'all know we got Governor Hot Wheels down there. Come on now.
So Governor Hot, she's at the Human Rights Campaign. Governor Hot Wheels, she's talking about Governor Abbott. So hold that thought, Chris. I want you to comment on that. So a guy who's been in a wheelchair for, almost 40 years because of an accident. She's making fun of him. So that's classy.
Yeah.
And the only thing hot about him is that he is a hot ass mess, honey. So yes.
All right. So Chris, your thoughts?
Boy, I don't know. I mean, first of all, she makes AOC look like Margaret Thatcher now by comparison, doesn't she? Good grief. I don't know. Is it a good look to go after paraplegics? I typically have not found that to be effective.
It's frowned upon. It's not illegal per se, but it's...
It's a weird strategy. I didn't have that on the bingo card this year. Yeah. Mocking people in wheelchairs. Okay, let's see how that works. No, she's a special kind of stupid. There's no doubt about it. I root for her. I mean, it's interesting. There's such a vacuum amongst the Democrats right now. You got Bernie shouting about oligarchy, which I think is hilarious, and AOC, and then poor Schumer, he's hanging on, by a thread. They want him out. MoveOn.org says we're not going hard enough left. Most mainstream Democrats, such as they are saying the party needs to moderate. So this progressive wing has this outsized influence with Democrats. Most voting Democrats are saying they want to moderate, according to the most recent NBC News poll. I mean, I don't know who wins this fight, but the progressives seem like they are not going to loosen their grip. David Hogg is their number 2 guy, for heaven's sakes now.
Which was a troll. He only got that job because Republicans were pushing him for it as a joke. And so this is where I'm going with this.
Okay.
I'm saying it. I'm calling it here on the Alex Marlow Show. Jasmine Crockett is a plant. She is for us. She is here for us. And I don't think the Democrats, even though I'm saying this, and we'll probably clip it and put it online, Chris, after the show, I still don't think they're going to figure it out, that we're sponsoring her somehow. There's a Republican conservative out there who is spending money on this person to keep her afloat and to keep her showing up at this stuff and whatever it is. We did a tour of her makeup room in her congressional office on the show. Chris, we went through it. She put out a video. She has a makeup room in Congress because of all these TV hits she's doing. Wow. She is a TV figure created to create talk radio content, and I'm very grateful to whichever brilliant conservative has given us this opportunity.
Boy, I couldn't say it better. I hadn't considered it. I'm going to consider it now. She's a gift. We should enjoy her. We should be thankful. Express gratitude. Chris,
it's a gift that you're on the air with us at Salem, and I really enjoy your show. I always have. And when I heard you were getting the morning slot, I was like, oh yeah, that makes perfect sense. Exactly right. So good for you. I hope it goes well. And I think it's really important that we continue to incorporate the good for you compliment whenever we can. Yes, because there's nothing feels better than a good for you.
Yes, and good for you and your show, Alex. And so glad that you're here.
And Misty, good for you for completing another podcast today.
Good for her. Yeah. You got to say it in just such a way. Good for her.
Yeah, it's true. No, you gotta have a little bit of contempt in it. You gotta have a little bit, just a dusting of contempt when you say.
I hope you'll come back on my show periodically when you have time.
Whenever you like. I'd love to do it. I love to do it. I love to be a guest because, as you could hear today, I genuinely feel like the talk radio audience is the tip of the spear in the conservative culture wars. And as much as we'd like to act like everyone has just moved on, I just don't think it's true. I think the people in talk radio audience are engaged. They vote. They've got money to spend on ads. It's a crucial group of people.
So smart. This audience, your audience, so smart. My audience, they're smart. They're engaged, as you said. And by the way, just as an aside, I mean, I haven't really paid you your respects and due. I know how much Salem thinks of you and the work you've done. Your writing, it's brilliant. Your podcast is brilliant. It's good to have smart people on the team, and you're one of the smartest. So thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And it is a very, very smart group, which makes it so much easier to do this job. Chris Stigall, so Chris Stigall Show, coast to coast, 400 stations. And you're based in Philly still, though.
That's home base. That's right. Yeah, okay, I go back and forth between my Midwest compound and Philadelphia both.
Okay, so we're going to have to bond next time over that we're both live somewhat behind enemy lines. Yes. And I think it's a good way to live, but that's a much longer conversation that we got to do that. But anyway, the show is, you should get it on podcast, you can get it on radio, and the Salem News Channel as well. Thanks to Misty. Thanks to all of you in the audience. Aloha at alexmarlow.com if you want to correspond with me. Talk to you next time.